Om Shanti. Good evening. Warm welcome to Interview with the Raj Yogi. Our topic tonight is Qualifications of a Forgiving Heart. And as always, let's begin with reflection. I sit here quietly, feeling my attention starting to concentrate, draw inwards, come to a point. That point behind the forehead, the self. And in that moment, I become a detached observer of everything outside. Looking out through the windows of the eyes and viewing everything from a still, peaceful place. Even inner activity of my own mind, my memories, everything. I watch it all from this peaceful point that is me. It's a neutral place. It sees everything, judges nothing, understands all. As if I am sitting in the very heart of the self. This very peaceful heart, the essence of who I am. Able to see everything. Judging nothing and understanding all. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti and welcome to Interview with the Raj Yogi. If you just joined, our topic is the qualifications of a forgiving heart. And so forgiveness is something many find very challenging. And so being in the study for more than a couple of decades, what have you discovered in terms of what seems to be missing in order for that to happen?
There's so many parts to forgiveness. And I know the phrase being used is forgiving heart. So there's two powerful words put together there, heart and forgiveness. And we have certain understandings of those two words that sometimes means they can't go together, right? So you hurt my heart. I don't think I can forgive you. And yet we're saying a forgiving heart. And to me, what creates a bridge between them is understanding. That's what really makes them go together, is to become understanding. And this word understanding has a very specific meaning in the spiritual study, a little bit different than worldly studies, where in a worldly study we study a textbook, we memorize it, we repeat it back on a test, and we're given a grade that supposedly suggests we understand. And that's not quite how it works in the spiritual study, that we do listen to knowledge, and then we really have to grind it into ourselves. We have to behave in accordance. We start to see our feelings align with that knowledge. And that means I'm understanding. So a forgiving heart's a very understanding heart. So that it's almost as if there's no question of forgiveness. There's just understanding. And because of that understanding, we often use the word, if we understand, we say, I see what you mean. I understand what you mean. So a forgiving heart is a heart that sees things in a different way, actually able to see and therefore feel very differently. So that understanding really transforms us at deep, deep levels. Once we get into the terrain of emotions, that's quite deep. And to be able to have really generous feelings as opposed to these emotions, very generous feelings, this means I truly have understood.
Sometimes they say that time helps in creating understanding, or it's a part of the ingredients. Just through the lens of the study, what is your understanding of how that helps? Because sometimes, as you're sharing, it's really reflected by how you're feeling. But seems like, I think we mentioned it last time, the last interview last week. Sometimes it feels like you can't even be receptive to even hear an explanation about something. It's just too much going on, too much emotions. So, how does time help?
Yeah, I think we need to be very sensitive and patient when we're dealing with a very profound moment and processing it. We need to be patient, but we also have to acknowledge, because I've heard time heals all wounds. And when I look at the world today, I'm not always seeing that. It depends how I fill the time, what I'm filling the time with, because some fill the time with just repeating the memory, repeating the memory. And it's like having a wound and opening it again, and it never heals. So it depends what I fill that time with. And I have to be compassionate in almost, how slowly I introduce new ideas or ways of seeing things, but I will have to see things in a new way for time to heal all wounds. So we know that we're seeing major wounds being carried forward and not seeming to heal at all, because we haven't had a chance to see things in a new way around old issues.
I'm not sure if you've had that experience or you've had a dream and it's not real. And something in a dream that happens, and you wake up and you realize it's a dream and you've had lingering emotions. And seems like that is a nice, perhaps maybe more of a layman's, if I'm going to use that word, pedestrian experience of being able to see the emotions and know, well, they're not really real because it was based on a dream. And I was thinking about that actually, just from your sharing too. There seems to be there's a bit of a freedom at that time to see all that, the emotions, and know it's not really actually relevant to a sense of reality, I suppose you can say. And so it does seem like there seems to be, whether we call it detachment or we call it freedom, is that a part of what's required for there to be some space for understanding to actually go deep inside?
Yeah, I mean, the dream metaphor holds well for Raj Yoga because we talk about awakening spirituality. So we're trying to wake up, or remember is the other word we use. So another example we could consider are, as we often talk about, are actors in a play. So while they're on the stage, they're aware that they are playing parts, and all sorts of interesting things could happen in the play, revenge and murder. You think, wow, I hope they can forgive them, but inside you're going, oh, but it's just a play. Of course there's nothing to forgive. It's just a play. Once they get off stage, they're good friends and everything's fine because they're aware that it's just a play. But if they forgot that there is any off stage, if they think whatever is going on stage is the entire reality, then they're going to start to get very upset. So this coming out of amnesia, awakening, oh yeah, it's not, this is not the full reality. It's such a natural, the actors won't even talk about forgiving. They'll just say it was part of the play, right? The emotions are, it's fascinating when you speak to actors who are, in these plays where all sorts of very intense things are happening and they are invoking these emotions in the audience, but internally it's quite almost comical because they're thinking about what will I have for dinner and maybe I'll go for a bike ride while you're it's just that the feelings are so natural in terms of that detachment because they know it's just a play. And this is very challenging when you're talking about intense incidents, but spirituality tries so much. This is the deepest understanding, to understand we're actors in a play, we're spiritual beings in this sort of corporeal realm, acting out parts. Everybody's okay. It really tries to awaken us to that. And we know we're awake by whether we're able to so-called forgive, or what happens with our emotions and feelings. That really reveals to us whether or not we're awake.
It sounds like that it's a tremendous shift inside them. And is there something called forgiving yourself for not having forgiven yet? And in that case, in the sense that it's a gap that we're learning to close of going into that reality. But along the way, things come up, and whatever that may be, maybe these subtle sensitivities. Everyone seems to have their own little buttons. And so, what is that like then in terms of trying to close that gap to go into that reality? And seems like that's sort of these little teeny forgivenesses I have to have just for all the stuff that's going on inside for that time when it just becomes a moot conversation within.
Mhm. So this obviously is the role of understanding that I make a mistake or something happens, and I understand, when someone's learning a new skill, um, there is what's called a learning curve, and it's not expected that they will be perfect, after one day. That there's an understanding that there will be ups and downs, a journey, especially if they are coming to that learning situation with old ideas. So the old ideas keep interfering, and it's a journey, really. And I think it's always very wise to be aware of that as you go into it. I mean, we're told and then we forget because we have crazy forces operating inside of us, but to be really aware that this is a journey and different things are going to happen. But what's very important is faith, very strong faith or recognition that, yes, I will be successful in this, even though it might look very funky at any given time. I have deep faith. So faith is huge. It's very forgiving. When there's faith, we're very forgiving of ups and downs and mistakes and sort of going backwards at times or whatever. But the faith that, okay, it looks very interesting right now, but I have faith that I am, as we say, victorious. I will reach the destination. And I I don't know how many times I've had to pull the faith card where it just looks like, I don't know, this is pretty bad, but yet I feel, no, no, it's going to be okay. We're going to get there. I have faith that I will be victorious.
One of the topics nearing the end of the month is about time. Maybe we'll have an ongoing theme for the month about time, different aspects about what time means. But one of the aspects in there is really about the cycle of time. And because I think that this will come up, because how does one really discern, I'm just trying to have hope, right? Versus, that there's a certainty. And I was really thinking actually a lot about that today. What makes Raja Yoga unique is a sense of certainty. And so, in terms of this sense of forgiveness, how have you felt in your own personal, just your study these last more than 25 years, in terms of, as you were saying, you're using what you learn in the study in terms of these eternal truths to see, constantly having to wash that through inside throughout the day, it seems like, at how I'm thinking, what comes up. What has that been like for you, the impact? You notice that through the journey in terms of the reactions and the responses, how they've shifted?
It definitely is a journey. So, obviously at the beginning, we are hyper reactive. And then as we go along, the reactions might still come, but now we have other tools, other capacities. They're starting to be refined that we can use to transform without any violence. We can start to say, okay, I see the reaction, the feelings are there, the emotions are there, but there's a piece of you now that is capable of having something else going on, this understanding. And so, sort of the balance between those two keeps shifting until, whereas before the reactivity was heavily weighted and there was nothing on the other side, over time it's shifting until we'll get to the point where constantly in the state of, we say, grace, maturity, mercy, and there's really, and we see this with the seniors, they're just not capable of having any feelings of revenge or hurt or anything. There's just so much compassion, so much accommodation, because their understanding is just so, we call it having a broad or big heart. It's just can hold anything. And it's not that there's, girding or it's violent. It's just they've completely absorbed the understanding such that they process things in a very different way. So it just keeps shifting over time, the balance between the two.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking about one of the aspects we learn in the study of Raja Yoga. The deepest core of who we are, we often call sanskars, which is impressions, these habits, but they used to be, these natural qualities that we as souls have. And but then through time, we get these other acquired experiences we call vices. So I was thinking about what you're sharing, because when we're going back to the example of an actor in a play, I think some, if not all, have heard of situations where actual actors have actually lost themselves in their parts, and some may have actually taken their lives because of that. So what's going on there? And that's why I was thinking about sanskars, because I'm assuming that they know that they are actors. But I know as actors, you have to get into the part. That means you have to get into the emotions. And it seems like sometimes those emotions can actually be irrelevant, but because they're so strong, it can blindside your sensibility. And it feels like even on a day-to-day level, that's really what happens when the emotions are so strong. It seems like it just takes over your capacity to, for the understanding, the sobriety to really actually help you to not react.
Yeah, I think in general, and definitely perhaps in these situations, but in general, what Raj Yoga or again a robust spiritual path will look at is really fortifying the sense of self. We use, in this case, knowledge, spiritual knowledge, or knowledge of eternal principles, and God, the company of God. We use these two things to really fortify our sense of self. The biggest thing that we really suffer from is a weak sense of self. And when the sense of self is weak, we're easily influenced. We can be easily affected, shaped, molded by all sorts of things. We lose ourselves completely. That integrity of self is not there. And then I think it can definitely snowball into these kinds of situations where you lose complete trust of the self. You just don't know really who you are, and you're not processing things in a really dignified or self-respectful way. So completely compromise the boundaries of the self, and then it can be affected this way. So to fortify that sense of self is super important.
When you're talking about, the role of God, then are we talking about the shift, as you were saying? There's the knowledge that helps shed light for how I see, how I think, but the role of God and the role of experiencing my sense of self, is it shifting things in that deep core so that even emotions change them?
It's really interesting what happens to the soul, and we're constantly trying to really understand what is going on in spirituality, because it's also incognito, invisible. But what we what we find, and this is separate from even just God, this is in general, is that we're very easily colored. Just in the example you gave, very easily colored by all sorts of different things. We call it the company we keep. Might be other people, it can be situations, ideas. This is why cyberbullying is such a fascinating concept. We're really easily colored. And so, what happens when the soul is colored by truth, which is what God is? What happens to us? We know that if we're colored by other things, we start to take on that color or be shaped by it. What happens when we are exposed to a exclusive connection to the truth? Nothing else, just truth. We're just stewing in truth, which is what yoga is about, this connection to God. And obviously, all the illusions, everything untrue will be melted, and just the truth will remain. So we say the alloy removed from the gold. So this is a power. This in itself, this true pure state is a power. And so that's really what we begin to see, this role of God. What knowledge is doing is it's helping to cut away the illusions, the falsehood, the things that I no longer need to believe. It's helping to cut that away. So I am free to be with the truth. I'm free to be with the truth. So it's a very powerful thing that's going on with spirituality, but it requires that we kind of do it with precision for it to really work out well. And we often kind of mix it or blur it or don't quite get it as precise as it could be, so the effects are perhaps less. But once one really reflects on what's going on, I think it will strike them quite deeply that it's a remarkable transformation in such a subtle, simple way.
Just when you're saying stewing in the truth, do you mean like just being in the vibration in that company, in the sense that we're so colored by any kind of company, and perhaps maybe we take for granted, except at the same time, we're kind of clear on that if you're around somebody who's constantly anxious, I think it can start to affect you. But if you're around somebody who has that quality, that personality, and it sounds like that personality truth is a very unique experience.
It is, and I think there's an added dimension to it that if anyone has a forgiving heart, it's God. We have the title Innocent Lord. So I'm not just doing truth, but I'm actually in the presence of a being who sees my entire story, my entire journey, all the crazy things that happen, and understands it. There is not a trace of judgment. The one thing the soul is seeking is, forgive me for I have sinned. This kind of thing is seeking absolution from this unworthiness, if you will. And so the one who really has a forgiving heart is God. What is the qualification? God is truth. So truth is the qualifications of a forgiving heart. That as a truth, he doesn't see anything as mistakes. He doesn't see anything as bad or wrong. He understands the eternal nature. He understands time, the story of souls. He understands everything completely. And that understanding does not judge, right? It just uplifts. There's no judgment. So to be in the presence of such a being really, it helps the soul to forgive itself, actually. To realize it was never a question even of forgiveness, but to come back into that worthy state.
So then we're talking about the qualifications then, and I know you were sharing about just really feeling that reality. And so for those who have not taken the Rajyo course, this aspect of experiencing and considering myself to be a soul. I am not this body. I'm not defining by all these things. So it's as if we're now backing things up. And then you also mentioned about recognition, about the real me, and maybe even recognition of truth. What can help me to, deepen that capacity to accept that I am a soul, so that feeling that I am an actor becomes a reality?
I suppose that's where the conversation about timing might come in, that it might take each one their own timing and depend on what they are destined to do, if you will. But exposure is really helpful, and we've seen that that's something that was quite present through the entire history of this organization. At the beginning, the exposure was almost continuous, so they were together a lot and constantly being exposed to spirituality. But also, it's very interesting. Some people 8, 9, 10 hours at work, so the bulk of their waking time, that's what they're exposed to. And they will be, I mean, it's amazing what they'll do, motivated to do, ambitious to do, like the amount of effort that they put into that, where they're being exposed, where they're getting their sense of value. And so if I'm able to expose myself to spiritual knowledge, at least on a consistent daily basis, not hit and miss, and have an opportunity to experience some attainment or benefit from that. So that means that, even sitting in meditation, sometimes souls just kind of give up a second too early. They're just about to have an experience, but of course, there's a lot of forces that don't want you to have an experience inside. So we kind of give up just a second. If we could just be a little bit more patient and give ourselves a chance with that faith in the self, a chance to experience, just to wait a few more minutes and for that experience to really enter. If we can experience attainment or benefit, that will motivate me to keep going, to have that interest to keep going. So it's this kind of upward spiral we have to get ourselves into. We do it with other situations. We'll do it with worldly school, we'll do it with work. We kind of get feedback, it makes us want to do more, etc. We feel attainment. So we kind of have to get that happening with spirituality, that I allow myself the time, I set a program, if you will, a consistent daily program. So I'm giving myself a chance to experience attainment, and that will help me to want to make more effort, to go more deeply into it.
Thank you for clarifying a bit more in terms of when you are saying timing, because I think some, oh, timing. Okay, well, it's not my
I'll do
timing. Okay,
nothing.
never mind.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for telling me that.
Yeah.
But when you were talking about consistency,
Yeah.
and perhaps maybe implied in that as well as, I think that what you were sharing was patience. That I'm not that I stop, not my time, but more that maybe things just need some time to click.
Yeah, I remember once I found, and again it's an inner decision. That's why I say, is it something that I'm destined to do? Because and that's not said to encourage apathy, because if you're destined to do it, you will not be apathetic. But I'm remembering a fitness class. It's a dance-based class. You have taken it, Pulse. And there was one participant in it, and I found it fascinating because she decided this on her own. And this is what I mean by timing. She said, and she'd never taken dance. She had no experience, but she chose to try the class. She says, I'm going to give myself 10 I'm going to give myself coming to 10 sessions before I make any decisions, because after one session she felt, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on. That was horrible and I was totally lost. But she didn't decide to give up. She said, I decided going into this, I'm giving myself 10 sessions. I'm going to come regularly for 10 sessions. After 10 sessions, then I'll make a decision, no matter how uncomfortable it might be in the beginning, because it does take a little bit of time for it to kind of kick into gear. And so she allowed, and I see many decide on their own. I don't say it. They just decide, no, I've decided I'm going to give myself these many sessions before I make a decision. And they're giving themselves time to adjust to the newness of it all. They're pulled to want to do it. And I will add, this is huge, whether it's a dance class or spiritual study, they are open to being vulnerable, to letting down their guard, to not listening to ego. We call it egoless. This is really important. So, yes, there'll be fear. Yes, there'll be uncertainty. Yes, there'll be doubt, all ego stuff. It's going to come, but I want to keep going anyways. And I would see that happening for these souls. They thought, okay, I look stupid. I don't know what I'm doing. But they just would keep coming until it started to make sense and they could start to enjoy it. Even this morning, it was very funny because the owner of the studio, who never has time to take this class, she was there helping out. And I said, why don't you take it? You can be my demo person in the back. And she said, okay, it might be the second or third time. And at the end of it, and I could see her because we're online, I could see her in the back and she was doing really, I'd never seen her do that well. And I said afterwards, wow, you were really, and she says, yeah, no, for some reason I just got into it today. I know it's only my second or third time, but things were starting to make sense. And she says, I was really enjoying it. So we have to, timing doesn't mean, it's like patience. It doesn't mean I'm doing nothing. I have a program. I'm allowing myself the time to adjust, to be able to acclimatize, if you will, to the changes. Again, that faith. I know this is beneficial for me. I know this is connected to where I want to go, but I also know it feels very awkward and different. So I'm going to give myself that time.
Maybe it'll have to be a conversation another day, but it seems to, am I using my time in an accurate way? Because you can use all the time you want if you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And sadly, if you don't even know, that's going to be even scarier.
Yeah, this again, and it's just everyone has different parts, and if anything's forgiving, it's the drama of life. It accommodates all these different crazy things we do, but luckily the saying truth will prevail, and that even if I'm going along for a long period of time doing things in a very imprecise way, eventually something will happen in the drama to kind of draw my attention to the fact. We might call it a crisis, we might call it a mishap, but it's actually a blessing in the drama, saying, okay, you're actually moving not quite in the right direction. So this has gone on for a while. I've given you a few signals so far and you didn't get it. So now I'm giving you quite a clear signal, and let's see if you get it. So I think drama is very forgiving that way.
Lovely. Thank you. I still really appreciate when you're sharing about timing because
Yeah.
sometimes I think that, we hear timing. How do I take that? Do I
Mhm.
take it as, oh, you know, just give up on myself,
Mm.
wait for time or something like that? And so I hope that we will continue with this session next week. Just a few more other aspects I think that can be covered in terms of addressing the qualifications. And so perhaps we'll just have a little reflection right now.
Mhm.
And if you have questions, we are always keeping an eye on the chat box. Let us know if you have topics you'd like to be covered in the interviews. You can email us as well.
Yes, and if there's anything on this topic that you'd
Yeah.
like to explore, drop us a note. Spirituality offers a very unique approach to self transformation, very different and yet quite sensible. It always looks at the seed of things, transformation of the seed, forgiveness at the seed, at the very essence. And the seed of the self really is connected to the feelings I have towards myself. They have very pure, elevated, understanding feelings towards the self, deep trust, belief, confidence in the self. In the story of every human soul, there are moments of greatness, and there's also moments of mistakes. To be able to appreciate the self at moments of greatness comes easily. But to still appreciate the self, value the self in the face of mistakes, this is an art. And without that art, I will not be able to draw a beautiful future for myself. Deeply understand the self, to know who I am, to see myself through God's eyes. And I will never have any doubts about the self again if I can. Mistakes will be understood, which is far more elevated than just forgiven. To forgive is beautiful, but when I understand, it supports me in not making that mistake again. I learn and use that learning to move forward. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you, Judy. And thank you to those who have joined us. I'll pass it back once again to Judy and let us know what is coming up.
So I hope you forgive me if I forget some things. So most things I believe are posted on our website, but there are some special things happening this month. So drop-in events will continue Tuesdays, Thursdays, Sundays. Saturdays, we still have inner fitness 2 to 3. And we also have self-care with our lovely young adult group 4 to 5. And this Sunday, the month of Sunday, this is the month where in the Hindu calendar, Shivratri, Mahashivratri is celebrated, which looks at that momentous time, the incarnation of God Shiva, the night of humanity. This being of light comes. It's very powerful memorial. So every Sunday from 6:30 to 7:30 during Sunday drop-in meditation, we'll be looking at a different aspect of the personality of God, illuminating the heart of God. So that will be every Sunday in the month of March in celebrating Shivratri. And I think there's also a workshop on the 20th of March, which is the light from within, 12 to 1:30 on Saturday, March 20th. So that's something that you might want to look to as well. So we'll try and keep our website as up to date as possible, but always feel free to email if you have any questions. Om Shanti. Oh, yes, there is also the Shivratri program, which will be in Hindi, and that's going to be March 7th. Is it 5? 4 to 5:30 p.m. online, and that should be posted on our website. I'm pretty sure that they've got that posted. So lots of choices this month. Om Shanti.